Hi, I have a possibly strange question, not sure if it's to be addressed publicly. What does Chabad say about programs such as NoFap and Guard Your Eyes? NoFap is apparently a program also that deals with people who are struggling on the internet with inappropriate imagery and so forth. And Guard Your Eyes is also for Shmiras Einayim, to help people guard their eyes. Now, obviously, we don't believe in hyperfocus on Sur Mirah. But could there be a healthy way to engage in such programs to gain the positive encouragement from them whilst not becoming engrossed in fighting with the problems with Shmiras Habris and Shmiras Einayim? This is a very interesting question, mostly because there's a lot of assumptions here. Let's read it again. What does Chabad say about programs such as NoFap and Guard Your Eyes? Obviously, we don't believe in hyperfocus on Sur Mirah. But could there be a healthy way to engage in such programs to gain positive encouragement from them, whilst not engrossing in fighting the problems with Shmiras Habris and Shmiras Einayim? I disagree with a lot of the assumptions that are being made here. I'm going to try to clarify that first, and then I'm going to address the issue. I'm just going to ask you that if you're listening to this, hear me out till the end, because you're not going to know what I think until I say everything I have to say. And if you'll hear only a part of what I'm saying, I'm afraid you'll misunderstand me. Statement number one, we don't believe in hyperfocus on Sur Mirah. That's not true. We absolutely believe on hyperfocus on Sur Mirah. We don't believe in negative focus on Sur Mirah. You're not allowed to do an Aveda, period, of any type. And the Rebbe brings in the very first page of the Inside Chassidus, on the essence of Chassidus, that one of the purposes of Chassidus is lifnim yishuras adin, to be particular, extra careful about mitzvahs. It doesn't only mean mitzvahs aseh, it means mitzvahs leisaseh as well. So if a person needs to stop himself from doing an Aveira, Chassidus would support any effort at a person stopping himself from doing that Aveira. But there's a difference between not doing the Aveira and hating yourself for doing the Aveira. Those are not the same thing. When we say that in the Hasidic culture we don't believe in hyperfocus on Sur Mirah, it means you don't believe in hyperfocus on self-hatred, on negativity. But the idea that a person has to do everything in his power to stop himself even from doing one more Aveira. If a person has to shalom is not oimed ben esoyin, always. Each time he's oimed ben esoyin and doesn't do something wrong, it's a great accomplishment. It's not about being perfect or failing. It's about doing our best. And we absolutely believe in hyperfocus on Sur Mirah. But the hyperfocus on Sur Mirah has to be positive, not negative. So any tool a person could employ in stopping himself from doing any Aveira is appropriate. But the emotions associated with that effort are not allowed to be negative. And that's the problem. When it comes to this particular business of Shmiras Habris, for various reasons, the feeling of the people who struggle with Shmiras Habris is a feeling of self-lowliness, of what they call in our culture, lack of self-esteem. They're ashamed, they hate themselves, they're embarrassed. I hate to say it, a lot of them think they're the only person struggling with this, and of course that's not the case. And this is a problem. This depression, sadness, hating yourself is not helpful to anybody. It's certainly not consistent with Midas Chassidus. And of course the reality of life is that a person has a weakness and they give in to this weakness, it makes them depressed. What do people do when they're depressed? They, as they call it in the culture, they medicate themselves. How do they medicate themselves? By doing the same Aveda again, which then makes them depressed, which makes them do the Aveda again. It's a cycle that never ends. So we have to separate the action of hyper-focus on Sur Mirah, which we actually absolutely support, and the hyper-focus on self-hatred, which is not an action, it's a behavior. So if I had to apply what I just said to practical terms, I would say this. And I guess I'm going to say this now, even though I plan to say it at the end. In the world in which we live, where we're facing tests of Shmiras Einayim, Shmiras Habris, that are really probably unprecedented, the nisyonos are incredible. And of course, the truth of the matter is, like the Gemara says about a Nazir, if a person is serious about Shmiras Sabris, he can't just be Shemiras Sabris and Shemiras Einayim, he has to make many steps before, which is whether he allows himself to have access to technology and how he puts blocks on access to that technology and how he has other people help him deal with it. You can't say, I'm going to take a kis molei zuhuvim and I'm going to sit in front of a Beizenis and Mayasa ben shalayechta. We deal with this on a regular basis. Our life is the Yeled who's standing with a kis molei zuhuvim in front of a Beizenis and Mayasa ben shalayechta. So, for people to deal with the Nisayon Shmiras Sabris, they need to be honest with themselves and not put themselves in a place where the steps that lead to the eventual failure in that area are allowed to progress. Which means you have to think 4 or 5 steps ahead and not allow yourself the first step, so that you're not going to come to the second step, and then you can Chas V'Shalom reach a point where, in quote, you lost control. And I believe that there's no way for a person to begin to win the battle of Shmiras Sabris unless they understand Kiddush and Tara. I don't think it's realistic in our generation for a person to be Shmiras Sabris just because it's an Aveda. You need to value Tara and Kedusha. You have to appreciate what Tara and Kedusha gives you. It gives you many things. And one of the things that it gives you is literally, it gives you Psichas Alev and Psichas HaMoyach and Limud HaTorah. People who have Tara and Kedusha, the Torah goes in. And people who have Chesedus and Tara and Kedusha, the Torah just doesn't go in as well. And certainly it's incredibly important when it comes to Avodas HaTfilah. Tara and Kedusha helps. So to be realistic, for a person to succeed in the battle of Shmiras Sabris, there needs to be a focus on Kedusha. Not becoming Tomei. You have to desire Tahara and Kedusha. And you have to do your best. And absolutely we support hyperfocus on Sur Meirah if we're talking about the behavior, but not on the emotion. And this is where the Rebbe's position is so extreme, where the Rebbe writes in his letters to people not to think about it, because thinking about it could make it worse, to leave it alone. And some of those letters are talking about holiness, and others are talking about other things, but I'm sure those ideas apply to situations that are not holiness also. But if a person is not going to have a negative emotion, self-hatred, to take steps to be Shemiras Sabris, we absolutely believe in hyperfocus on Sur Meirah. Now I just want to say one other thing before I move on, and that is that I have a belief, and this you can disagree with if you so desire. I have a belief that when the Rebbe writes in all his letters, which are now printed, of course, in the Shulchan Menachem, it used to be in the Shari Allahu Minik, now it's called Eitz Menachem. They're printed in Yeredeya, they're probably printed in Neirachayim, a series of answers to the Rebbe Benegetin of Shmiras Sabris, and as a rule, the Rebbe talks about Masiach Das. I have a belief, and I can't tell you this for sure, that in addition to the first reason for the Hesach Das, because it's going to depress a person and bring a person down, which is terrible. And for some reason, this test has the unique characteristic of making people not like themselves more than other nisyonis. I believe there's another factor. And the other factor is that tshuva, right? It's another misnomer. Tshuva means not doing it again. Tshuva doesn't mean feeling emotionally sad and bitter and hating yourself and hitting your head against the wall. Ikar tshuva is to stop the negative behavior. That's what tshuva is. The other things, charata, vidui, bakashas machila, these are higher madregis than tshuva. Shleimus tshuva. But tshuva ostensibly is to stop the bad behavior. And I have a suspicion that what the Rebbe is really saying in these answers is, when you're ready to do tshuva, do tshuva. But tshuva means to stop the behavior. When a person is going through this nisayon, and the reality is that he's not ready to stop the behavior. You know, like the expression from the Mendel's Sipur, ich hab gesindigt und gesindigt und weiter. I think this is a part of it also. The Rebbe says, don't think about it. When you're ready to do tshuva, you'll do tshuva. And doing tshuva means that you're going to reach a stage in your life, either because you're stronger, or because you're older, or because you're married, where you're literally in a maimed matzev, where you can be shaming us the way you're supposed to be, then you'll do tshuva. Tshuva means you're going to stop. And until you're ready to do tshuva, be Mashiach das. And again, I don't know if this is the pshat in the letters, but this is a hunch that I have. So now, getting back to this piece of paper, we don't believe in hyperfocus on Shomena. I don't agree with that statement. We don't believe in hyperfocus on self-hate. But if a person can help himself with Shomena without it being negative emotionally, we absolutely believe in hyperfocus on Shomena. Okay, now let's continue. Could there be a healthy way to engage in such programs, such as no FAP and guard your eyes, to gain positive encouragement from them, whilst not engrossing in fighting the problems which made us Ibris Vishidas Hayinayim? Of course. The answer, of course, absolutely. Yes, whatever is going to work to help a person gain control over these tests, they should employ. But remember, you can't just control the behavior. There needs to be positivity. And if a person is going to engage in these programs, and it's going to help him with Shmiras Habris, and it's going to depress him and make him hate himself, so first of all, it's not sustainable. It's not going to last. And it's going to ultimately bring to bigger inyonim that are not beseder. But if a person can use these programs, they can help him gain control over himself, he should absolutely use them. And I'm going to speak to an idea which is brought in Chassidus, which is very interesting, that Chassidus brings from Kabbalah, that a mitzvah needs to have a kavanah. A mitzvah needs to have a kavanah, right? And if you do a mitzvah with a wrong kavanah, so of course Alter Rebbe discusses it in Tanya, Perek Mem, Lametes Mem, depending on how bad the kavanah is, how it's correctable and can it be corrected, etc., 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 right? But mitzvahs must be done with kavanah. What if I do a mitzvah with a negative kavanah? For self-interest, to show off, whatever the case is. So it says in Kabbalah Sfarim, and it's brought in Chassidus, that when I do a mitzvah the wrong kavanah, if it's a mitzvah sasei, it's ra shebenayga. And if it's a mitzvah slei sasei, it's tev shebenayga. Meaning, if I am using an ulterior motivation to do something good, that motivation is considered the klipa aspect within noiga. Noiga is in between klipas tmeis lagamri and gedusha, and it's considered the negative half. But if I could use a negative motivation to stop myself from doing an aveda, that's called tev shebenayga. Meaning to say that when it comes to stopping oneself from doing something wrong, whatever technique you need, whatever you got to use it. And I want to make it very clear again that Rebbe doesn't have an issue with people working very hard in their Sor Meirah. The Rebbe is very afraid from the sadness, from the negativity which is associated with this. And unfortunately, there is a lot of negativity and sadness associated with this, and this is the Rebbe's objection. So if these programs help you, you should use them. But I want to say again, two things, and I'll say them again. Number one, if a person wants to be matzliach in these inyonim, there needs to be a focus on Tahara and Kedusha. It cannot be on staying away from the Tumah. And number two, Ivdu as Hashem besimcha. The Baal Shem Tov, Chassidus of every type, and certainly Chabad also, believe with an incredible degree of priority that life and our avodas Hashem is based on us being besimcha. This test particularly, the union of simcha, is very, very important. The person has to be freilach, and from the simcha comes the koyach to deal with all the various neseinos that we have. And again, as I said in the very beginning, let's not fool ourselves. If we want to master ourselves in these areas, we cannot say, I'm going to do the first thing wrong, and the second thing wrong, and the third thing wrong, and I'm going to stop right before I do the fourth thing wrong. That's the mashal of the Anaki Shel Zehuvim, which is totally Tzavare Shel Yala. Then you put him in front of a Beis, or the example the Gemara brings from a Nazir. You tell a Nazir, don't go near a liquor store. It's a Gemara Mefereshes. If a person has a problem with alcohol, the Gemara says, you see a liquor store, cross the street. The Gemara says it. Now, of course, Nazirus has to do with yayin, and it's also asr in mechatzan and badzog. You're not allowed to eat grapes. But everybody understands that it's not about the grapes, it's about the alcohol. It's about shikness. And the Gemara says, you got a problem with alcohol? Never walk in front of a liquor store. The Gemara says that. And the same is true when it comes to this test. We have to be honest with ourselves and take steps not to get to the point where the nisayin is impossible, almost impossible. Kamei nisayin mamish, and we have to be positive. We have to be positive. We have to be positive. I hope this answers the question.